Well, good afternoon. Good morning if you're in other time zones. And if you're watching us on the replay, we also want to welcome you here. So, this is today's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. First of all, Brandy had a commitment, so she's not going to be joining us today. We're really going to miss her because usually she's got some really good inputs into this, and maybe she'll have some comments on this in the comment section. Maybe she's even watching us out there. So anyway, we also want to apologize because last week, due to a commitment, myself and Cheryl couldn't be on. So we didn't do an episode last week. So hopefully this one will make up for it this week. So today we've got a really good episode coming out for you. It's actually going to contain some of the parts that I use in a keynote I've developed that I actually presented this past week at the infrared conference and thermal imaging conference in Lake Tahoe, Nevada, which was a really interesting experience getting home. It was almost like an expedition, spending 15 hours in an airport waiting on the plane takeoff. So anyway, Cheryl, what's your thoughts on today's episode?
Well, I think it's something everyone needs to hear because life has its obstacles, and without the obstacles, you honestly wouldn't know what were the good times. And a lot of times you don't get where you're going without some pain, like you did at the airport or whatever. It's the way life rolls, and you have to roll with it.
That's it. So my point of view on speaking actually involves pain, and we'll talk about this right after we get back from our little intro. We'll be right back with you. So hang around, and we'll rock and roll with today's episode. It's going to be on change and pain. So, anyway, appreciate the people that are on here today. Okay, so let's talk about one of the things about this world is change is a constant thing. And some years ago, when Cheryl and I were going through speaker training with Larry Winget and Suzanne Evans, one of the things that we had to do was develop up what's called a point of view. And Cheryl got this really quick. She was one of the first people in the class that came up. So, Cheryl, let's start with why don't you share your point of view because I think it has a bearing on what we're going to talk about today.
Mine is be able to say, I'm glad I did instead of I wish I had.
There you go. So that was Cheryl's point of view. And mine was involved with the word change. And actually, in the training, we were actually able to listen to a guy named Damian Mason, who's actually a coach and speaks on change that concentrates in the agricultural industry, which that's a industry that has gone through constant change and threats all the time from different government regulations. So my point of view, which is for short, we call it a POV, is change can be painful. It's up to each of us to decide if we want to undergo the pain of change or are we going to remain in the pain that we're in. So today, that's what we're going to talk about because what I want to share with you today in a portion of the keynote that I do now for groups is about how to avoid the pain of change. So Cheryl, anything you want to say before I start off today?
I just want everybody to listen and put the values to their life and realize that, like a person that just wrote in here, we have people that don't feel normal unless there is things to change. We all live in that world right now where we're constantly changing. So learn to take it, embrace it, and move on.
Right. And like I said, StreamYard doesn't cooperate showing people's names. So if you make comments, we appreciate it. We don't know who you are because StreamYard's just not cooperating. And I know when I watch a live broadcast, it always says Facebook user. And I've started to just add my name at the end so somebody knows who is on there. So anyway, this past week was an opportunity that I actually went to Lake Tahoe, Nevada. And to get there, I flew to Sacramento, which is the closest airport that I can get a direct flight into the Lake Tahoe area from Charlotte, North Carolina. Because one of the things that I hate the pain of is changing planes. The last time I changed planes, I got stuck in Denver, Colorado all night. So I shoot for direct flights. My life is less painful for me to drive a couple hours after I get somewhere than it is to wait in an airport and hope I can get there in time, do the plane change and all that. So anyway, I'm heading out and I'm going to Sacramento. Now, I went to Sacramento on a Sunday night, got into Sacramento late, checked into a hotel. To be honest, was a painful experience. Didn't meet my expectations at all because it looked like it had been damaged by a recent earthquake. But excuse me, I survived that night. So Monday morning this past week, it's like, okay, let's head up to Lake Tahoe. And if you've never been to Lake Tahoe is located in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And Facebook user, this will be up as a replay. We hate you can't stay with us for all of it. Yes, the replay will be up. So anyway, I'm riding up, and I've rode up Interstate 80 several times in my lifetime, going to Lake Tahoe and the Reno, Nevada area. And as you go up into Lake Tahoe, or you coming up the highway on Interstate 80, there's a rest area there. And the rest area is located at what is called Donner's Pass. And Donner's Pass is just a couple miles away. Well, on Monday, I wasn't rushed to get there. And one of the things that Cheryl will tell you I like to do is when I'm traveling, many times I'll get off the main highway because there's something that I want to see or I wanted to experience. And one of them was Donner's Pass. So what I did, I clicked on my GPS and I went over and went to where Donner's Pass was. It was about 10 minutes off of the interstate. Now, if you don't know the story of Donner's Pass, I'm going to share it with you here today because this is a very valuable learning experience for anyone to hear what I'm getting ready to say about Donner's Pass. And I'm going to tell you before I get into this, this was probably one of the most horrendous tragedies in American history that could have been avoided. And that's the key thing. These people went through massive change and what they had to do to simply survive. And if you don't know the Donner Party story, some of this is going to be rather drastic. So what happened here was that in 1846, the Donner Party decided to leave from Illinois. They had heard Horace Greeley say, "Go west, young man, go west," because that's what people were doing. Well, in those days, the only way to go west was you were going to go on horseback, you were going to ride, or maybe you would get a wagon like wagon trains used to go and heading to the West Coast. Well, there were certain processes that you've got to follow if you're going to make this trek to the West Coast. It's very, very important that you do that. And step one is you need to leave Independence, Missouri, which is the starting point for the Western Trek at that time. You need to leave no later than mid-April. Mid-April. And there's a reason for this, as we're going to get into this, but you got to leave in time. This was a recognized thing. The next process was there was a proven trail to take you to there that had been cleared, the trees were cut down, and everything else. So keep this in mind. What happened with the Donner Party is they didn't follow the process. They didn't follow the experiences of the people that had already been over this. So on May the 12th of 1846, this westward bound wagon train headed out from Independence, Missouri, and their plan was to take their families and resettle in California. Remember, Horace Greeley had said, "Go west, young man, go west." So they headed out, and this was where things got really awry. What they did is there was a shortcut that was written up, but however, the man that described the shortcut had never been on the shortcut before, okay? He came out of the blue telling people there's this shortcut through the Sierra Nevada mountains. But the problem was this shortcut was untested, and there were places that a wagon could not pass. In other words, they had to cut the trees down to get through. And there weren't no chainsaws in that day. They were doing this with large saws and they were doing it with axes. So what happened here was they took this shortcut and they traveled into the Sierra Nevada Mountains. Now, if you've never been to the Sierra Nevada mountains, this is some extremely rough terrain. I am talking about we're sitting at 8,000, 9,000 feet above sea level. Keep that in mind. And I was just there. And believe me, the nights when I was there this week were down in the 30s already. And it actually felt and looked like it could snow at any time. So they reached the slopes of the Sierra Nevada mountains in mid November. Now, they should have been a month ahead of this at this point. And what had happened here, 89 people left on the journey. And at this point, when they got stalled, when they got stuck in the Donner's Pass area, actually they were down to 81 people. 8 people perished in the journey from Independence to get to Donner's Pass. Okay. And when they were at Donner's Pass, there was only about another 100 miles to go to get where Sacramento is today. Because actually, I drove to Sacramento, a little bit under 2 hours drive time, but you can imagine 100 miles doing a wagon that's only going to get a couple miles a day. And here, many of the people that were stuck there were under the age of 18, and 6 of them were infants. 6 of these survivors at this point were infants. So they got stuck there in mid November. In the middle of December, 15 members of the party made homemade snowshoes, and they set off in hopes of finding someone to help them get this party out or to bring supplies in. And this is where the story really gets tragic at this point forth. These people ran out of food. They ran out of provisions. They were eating leather. They were eating bark off of trees. Basically, starvation was set in. And actually, at the rest area there at Donner's Pass on the interstate, there's actually a plaque there that is erected in memory of this Donner Pass. They were on the shores of what's called Truckee Lake. And today, Truckee Lake is now known as Donner Lake. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area. If you go to my Facebook page, I actually shot a video on Monday from there, and you can see what the terrain looks like. However, what happened here was these people were starving. Their families were starving, and they resorted to something that many of us cannot conceive, and that is some members of this party resorted to cannibalism. 2 members of the party were actually murdered and cannibalized. That's right. I'm telling you, this is an honest story. You can go, you can research it, and I'm giving you the facts as I've done it in my research. But what happened even worse, as people starved, this group of survivors actually cannibalized the dead bodies. Think about that for a minute. Think about if you had your family sitting there and you were starving to death. Some of these people were not rescued until April of that year. In fact, one survivor was found who had went half mad or insane because of the experiences that they had went through. So, but the key thing is here, I don't want to share this story with you to simply share a tragedy. Let's think back. If they had followed the proven path, they would not have been in this situation. That shortcut took them a month longer to make the journey than if they had followed the established path. They weren't properly prepared for winter. They didn't have enough provisions. And when you look at it in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and Cheryl and I have both been there, the snow there is not measured in inches, and it's not measured in feet. It's measured in yards. When you go down the highways and the roads there, you'll see these really tall poles sticking up, and they're way up in the air. And what those are for is for the snow plows to locate what the edge of the road is. But the whole thing here is, how do you avoid pain? You avoid pain by understanding and learning from those who have traveled before you. You learn from that. You also have to have your cautions out. When we talk about the wagon trains going out, wagon trains years ago, then when they traveled, always had a scout. And as our friend Randy Pennington used to share with us in the classes we took with them, what was the scout for? The scout was out there to detect where the hostiles were. And what happened when they had hostiles is everybody banded together, they circled the wagons. But that's the lesson for the day I want to share with you, which is How do you utilize the learning of others in order to avoid the pain of change? Because change is constant. When we look at business today and we look at our lives, Lord, has it changed from what it was just a few short years ago? And it seems like every day that we go through pain. But this is the question: how can you avoid it? And my idea of avoiding is to listen to the counsel and listening to the advice of mentors in your life, coaches, people that have been through these type of disasters in their life. So Cheryl, I've given a really long rendition of the story that went a little over 10 minutes here. As I said this and we talk about pain, what is your advice to our listeners on how to avoid these painful experiences in life that we go through from change? I can't hear you. Turn your mic on, sweetie.
Sorry, the puppies were going wild. I just want to add one thing to your story to make it not quite as gruesome. The two that were murdered were at the edge of death, and that the people were at the point of starvation, and that's why that happened. I did a pretty good intense study on this one time. It's very interesting, but it does give you that cast on the pain. Now, my thing is a lot of the reason, like you said, that people have their own pains that they didn't see others or they didn't train others. And we see this a lot in businesses where people get hurt simply because they didn't have the training of how not to do it. And so I think we all have to be very diligent at what we're doing, but we also have to train others so they don't have to make the mistakes we've made. You and I both have crossed roads that we both would love to back over and try again. But did we learn? I think so. And that's the thing. If you don't have pain, then you've never tried anything. That's what I've always been told. So without that pain, you don't know what to do in situations. So the thing is, train your people, train your children, but learn from your mistakes so you can pass the correct answers down to the next generation.
Yeah. And Cheryl, let's give an example of that. In our lives, in our lifetimes, you and I went through very traumatic times from having parents that turned elderly. And what happened as parents get elderly, many times you become the parent and you're going through, and Cheryl, you say it's not, she's raising parents. But what that's actually meant was we were looking after several sets of parents. We had a lot of people that depended on us. So one of the things that she did during this period was she became, this is actually what drove her to go through her Ziegler training and become Ziegler certified. Her first thought process was that she was going to work with people that were facing this challenge. Because let me tell you something, to watch your parents deteriorate in their mental condition, to watch them where they're no longer eating properly, where they are, their memories are really short. And many times, be honest with you, they don't even know who you are. And there's times you go that they visualize you're somebody else. So Cheryl put out in life, one of the things that she wanted to do was help people that were going through this. So when she went through her Ziegler training and coaching, this was part of the group that she was gearing to. And since that time, Cheryl, how many books have you written to share with people your experiences and how to go through this? How many books have you authored on this?
I've authored three that were totally dedicated to this. I have some others that touch on it, but the three of them are totally dedicated.
Yeah. And like I said, Chuck Roydhouse just added because he and Linda have gone through this with aging parents and where you're starting to look for them. In fact, I would say that at this point, Chuck has relocated to Tennessee from where he was in Maryland. But I would say that while the parents were living, Chuck, you can agree or disagree. I don't think you would have relocated to Tennessee if the parents had still been there, because looking after them would have made it a very difficult proposition. So as you look at it, Cheryl, let's repeat your point of view again, because now maybe people can understand this of what your point of view actually means.
Instead of saying, I wish I had, be able to say, I'm glad I did. That totally originated many, many years ago, but it resonated when my dad was ill.
That's it. And if you'd like Cheryl's books on this, if you go to Amazon and simply type in her name, it'll bring up the books that she's authored that are on Amazon like that. Okay. And Chuck just added there, would not or could not leave, had three parents to take care of. So Chuck and Linda, I know them very well, and this was what they had to dedicate their life to. But again, I can also remember from a relationship with them, and Chuck, you can say yes or no, but I think that us being able to help them through these challenges was one of the things that I think gave them strength of what they were going through. It was just like I had a grandson, and my grandson was born and he had an issue and I had to have surgery that I really didn't understand. And at this point, it took the advice of, and be honest with you, Chuck's wife Linda helped me understand this tremendously. And what it was is my grandson was born, and his skull was not split, is my understanding. And what happens is when you're an infant, when you're born, your skull is actually in two places, so your brain can grow. And now it's been noted that many people don't have that. So I was told by my daughter that her baby was going to have surgery. And be honest with you, I didn't want to ask the questions of my daughter because it would have been very, very trying for her. But the learning and the education that Linda Roydhouse had was able to help me tremendously to understand what my grandchild was going to go through. Because to be honest with you, the doctor was kind of nonchalant about this. I went to the surgery. And the doctor, I said, how do you do this? Oh, we just go and split the head up across the top. We just take some snips in there and like say, what? I mean, you're talking about an infant here that you're getting ready to cut the skull open. But again, being able to use the mentorship of others enabled us to get through and understand this. And see, this is what you look at. Whenever you're going through trials and tribulations and all those kind of things, like I said, Chuck just put on here, Linda Roydhouse was trained at Johns Hopkins University. So when you look at it, her counsel helped me as a grandfather to understand what's getting ready to go on, what's happening in life, and being able to accept that change. So, Cheryl, I got another story I'm going to do in just a minute, but what have you got to add to this?
You know, another thing I've always said is I can deal with what I understand. It's the unknown that just blows me out of the water. So when we were raising the parents, and I'm sure that's not the word you want to use, when we were taking care of parents, when I had the explanations, it was great. I was lucky enough to have Google to help. Please don't get a lot of information off Google, but I got enough to understand their diseases, which made it easier than I could explain it to you. And we were able to navigate this, whether it's parents, children, grandsons, whatever it is, as long as you know what's going on. And as you realize, we are moving into an older age, and Chuck's right with us, where we will become the taken care of one day. So hopefully, time and the knowledge that we pass on will help.
Yeah, and that's a scary thought when you're talking about two people that have high D personalities to say, hey, somebody else may have to make decisions for us one day. That's
Not
going to be a
good.
tough one, okay? That's going to be a tough one. I mean, they better put their big boy pants on when they start that one because corralling me or you is going to be really difficult. So if they're listening right now, you're going to have a challenge on there because I'm not going to probably be as cooperative as a lot of people would be. And I don't think she'll be either. But to give you another story of this, of change and understanding what you're going through is another experience that I've had. And what it was, back in the 1990s, I decided to take my first airline trip. Okay. Now I get on the airplane, I'm full of anxiety. Naturally, I'm nervousness. I was actually going to Washington, D.C., and I'm on an airplane for the very first time in my life. But something happened on that airplane, which was I figured that planes are going to go through the air smoothly. What's going on? And all of a sudden, this plane starts bouncing around up in the air. And I'm a very nervous flyer. I mean, I am sweating to death. I hated getting on the planes. You can see Cheryl shaking her head, yes. But to do what I do for a living, I have to utilize air travel. If you can imagine, going to Lake Tahoe from here like I did last week. If I was going to take that trip by automobile, that's a 2 week journey going there and back. If I'd have took it by train, it still would have been probably 2 days, 2 to 4 days going, 2 to 4 days coming back. Yeah, I'd seen a lot of beautiful scenery, but I got a job to do. I can't do my job if I'm out here on the road. So anyway, this is where the advice of others come into play, which was I started asking pilots what's going on. Tell me about turbulence because I was deathly afraid. I would see those wings shaking out there and I didn't know what was going on. I figured that wings are going to break off. But one night I was on a Southwest Airlines flight and the pilot came over with words that live with me to this day every time I hear turbulence come up. And he said the following. This is your captain speaking. I want to alert you that there's a little rough air ahead. And this flight might get a little bit bumpy. So we need you to make sure to buckle your seatbelts and, make everything stationary. Don't be holding anything in your hand because it may bounce out of your hands and you might get your drink on you. So, I've told the flight attendants they've all got to have their seats. So he said, but here's what I want you to think about. What I want you to do is put yourself in your mind that you're traveling down a really bumpy road with some potholes in it. And you're in a big old SUV and the shocks are worn out. That's kind of what this is going to feel like. And then from that point, I actually did more counsel. I actually watched a movie made by Boeing where they took the wings of the airplane and brought them all the way together until they broke. So doing those kind of things, I mean, those were things that I could not have come up with on my own, but it developed from the people that had the knowledge to help me and help me understand. And see, that's the thing about this world. There's all kinds of people out there that are willing to help you. But what you got to be doing is you got to be willing to make that effort to reach out and listen to trusted mentors that can help you when the turbulence gets bad. Because in change, often turbulence is going to be a factor and it's going to create chaos in your life. So, Cheryl, anything you would add to what I'm saying?
Hey, turbulence is every day, whether it's airplanes or not. And we forgot to welcome Robert with us, and thanks for coming in, Robert.
Yeah,
But
appreciate you being here, Robert. Appreciate your comments today.
but the world's made up of change. Change is inevitable. Plane flights getting delayed is getting more inevitable. Life is getting more complicated. So be willing to change with times. Can do you want to read that, or would you?
No, this is from Robert, Robert is one of the coaching, he's a member of one of the coaching groups that I'm in. And he said, my stepfather left early due to complications of Alzheimer's. But as he had been a master craftsman and accomplished in Aikido, there was nowhere that contained him for very long. Was even able to get out of a police ankle bracelets. Then he was admitted to Ontario Shores for 24/7 doctor observation. They took him off all his meds and tried a little of this and that until they found something that returned his memories to him. So the final 3 weeks were spent surrounded by family. So see, that's what we're talking about. Being able to get assistance. And this is the one things I notice. I'm noticing where people often have failure. And do you know something, Cheryl, I'm seeing? They always blame someone or something else. And you see, if you read my book, Chaos to Reinvention, I went through what was called a magic moment in those days. I wanted to blame everybody and everything for what we were going through. And I could not recover from that or even hardly talk about it with hatred until I realized it was all my fault, all my fault. So what you got to do, and here Robert added another comment. I forgot to add that it inspired much gratitude. I do sometimes forget to add the conclusion to my comments. So appreciate your addition there of your comments, Robert. But again, what we have to look at is how have we contributed to the failure? How have we contributed to the pain of what we're going through from the pain of change? Because there's one thing for sure in this world, if you run a business today, you're going to have to change your processes of what you were before. You got more government regulations. You got a fleet of people. Right now, we're facing something we never thought we'd face, which is called quiet quitting. We're facing times of people that do not want to work a full 40-hour work week any longer. We're facing people that are looking for a work-life balance. And if we go back to many years ago, if we take someone 40 years ago and you told an employee to jump, the employee's question was, why? And in today's world, that employee is saying, why am I jumping? It's a totally different approach. But again, don't blame others when you go through failure. The failure is yours. You got to step up. You got to own the failure. You got to own it. But how do you avoid these things? You avoid these things by reaching out to trusted people who have been through this. This is one of the things that I think that I share with people in my coaching practice. And I tell them, bring your problem to me. It's probably already occurred in my lifetime. I've probably already survived this. I've done been through the pain. Use my counsel and let's hope we can prevent you. And Robert just added another comment, Cheryl. And this is very powerful. It took me a very long time to understand why I need to own my circumstances, to take back my power, and to give me the right to change things so that everything has happened for me. And that's very true, Cheryl. So your turn, Cheryl. What would you say next?
I want to agree with Robert there. I mean, you get strength from accepting what's happened to you, and it's a learning experience. It's we usually call, a lot of times we'll call it, to our clients, we'll call it adult tuition. It's the learning that happens as you grow to pay your way forward. And the more you learn, and sometimes it's easier to say, the more that happens to you, the more you can help others. Because as if you do like Robert did and take the responsibility and move on. But like Jerry said, so many of people do, they never take the responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. It's like in a business, somebody does something out in the, I have a manufacturing plant, I'll use it. And I can guarantee you it's everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
Nobody picks it up and goes from there. But life goes on. What I tell everybody is if you do something wrong, raise your hand, admit it, and do your best to fix it and go on with life.
Yeah. And you know what, that Chuck just made an excellent comment, which is, and we're a firm believer in this, and Chuck is an old time student of mine and systems and become a very effective systems guy. But like he puts here, what you want to do is create the systems, eliminate the waste, and increase the profits. And all this together, what it does, it creates a happy work environment for the employer and the owner. But the problem you're often going to have is we just don't listen to the counsel. We just can't get it accomplished because maybe we have mental blocks. And I got up a minute because I wanted to get something to bring back in there for the program. But it's like all of a sudden, a few years ago, the way that we had done business basically had a disrespect for our employees' safety. We really didn't have the safety awareness that we have today. Now, how did this come about? It